Welcome to this daily PBJ devotional. This devotional is about Matthew 17. After 6 days, Jesus took with him Peter, James, and John, the brother of James, and led them up a high mountain by themselves. There he was transfigured before them. His face shone like the sun, and his clothes became as white as the light. Suddenly Moses and Elijah appeared before them, talking with Jesus. Peter said to Jesus, "Lord, it is good for us to be here. If you wish, I will put up 3 shelters, one for you, one for Moses, and one for Elijah." While Peter was still speaking, a bright cloud enveloped them, and a voice from the cloud said, "This is my beloved Son, in whom I am well pleased. Listen to him." When the disciples heard this, they fell face down in terror. Then Jesus came over and touched them. "Get up," he said. "Do not be afraid." And when they looked up, they saw no one except Jesus. As they were coming down the mountain, Jesus commanded them, "Do not tell anyone about this vision until the Son of Man has been raised from the dead." The disciples asked him, "Why then do the scribes say that Elijah must come first?" Jesus replied, "Elijah does indeed come, and he will restore all things. But I tell you that Elijah has already come, and they did not recognize him, but have done to him whatever they wished. In the same way the Son of Man will suffer at their hands." Then the disciples understood that he was speaking to them about John the Baptist. When they came to the crowd, a man came up to Jesus and knelt before him. "Lord, have mercy on my son," he said. "He has seizures and is suffering terribly. He often falls into the fire or into the water. I brought him to your disciples, but they could not heal him." "O unbelieving and perverse generation," Jesus replied, "how long must I remain with you? How long must I put up with you? Bring the boy here to me." Then Jesus rebuked the demon, and it came out of the boy, and he was healed from that moment. Afterward, the disciples came to Jesus privately and asked, "Why couldn't we drive it out?" "Because you have so little faith," he answered. "For truly I tell you, if you have faith the size of a mustard seed, you can say to this mountain, 'Move from here to there,' and it will move. Nothing will be impossible for you." When they gathered together in Galilee, Jesus told them, "The Son of Man is about to be delivered into the hands of men. They will kill him, and on the 3rd day he will be raised to life." And the disciples were deeply grieved. After they had arrived in Capernaum, the collectors of the 2 drachma tax came to Peter and asked, "Does your teacher pay the 2 drachmas?" "Yes," he answered. When Peter entered the house, Jesus preempted him. "What do you think, Simon?" he asked. "From whom do the kings of the earth collect customs and taxes? From their own sons or from others?" "From others," Peter answered. "Then the sons are exempt," Jesus said to him. "But so that we may not offend them, go to the sea, cast a hook, and take the first fish you catch. When you open its mouth, you will find a 4 drachma coin. Take it and give it to them for my tax and yours." This is God's word. God's law required Jewish men to pay a flat tax at every census for the service of the tent of meeting, as Exodus chapter 10, verses 11 through 16 says. By the time Jesus came along, this tax had become an annual fee required of every man in Israel, every man between the age of 20 and 50 years old. So the tax we read about here in Matthew 17, 24 through 27 was not a Roman tax, but a fee paid for the ongoing ministry of the temple. Every good Jewish man paid it as part of his faithfulness to God in obedience to God's law. This is why Peter answered so quickly and confidently when he was asked if Jesus paid the temple tax. We saw Peter's answer in verses 24 and 25. Other men might be tax cheats and religious deadbeats, but Peter was certain that Jesus wasn't among them. It turned out, however, that Peter spoke out of turn. If you were an Uber driver, you would not charge your kids if you drove them to school, even though you charge everyone else for a ride. That would just be weird and stupid. Likewise, Jesus did not pay that temple tax because he's the Son of God, as we saw in verse 5. There was no need for him to pay his Father for admission into their house, as we saw in verses 25b and 26. Peter had just witnessed Christ's transfiguration in verses 1 through 8, so he should have, reasoned this way to the right conclusion. But because of what Peter said, Jesus had to pay the tax money now. Otherwise, he'd appeared to be deceptive, and this situation would have caused stumbling. That's what the word offense in verse 27 says. And so it would have offended or caused to stumble those who had asked the question. Because Peter is the one who put Jesus on the hook for these taxes, he could have taken the responsibility to pay Jesus' tax himself. Christ could have insisted that Peter do that for the same reason. Learn your lesson, Peter. Pay up. Instead, Jesus told Peter how to perform a miracle that would pay both Jesus' and Peter's tax in verse 27. This story demonstrates the implication of two truths in this passage. One is that Jesus is the Son of God, as the Transfiguration demonstrated. We saw that and read about it in verses 1 through 8, especially verse 5. The implication of that truth is that the temple belongs to him, so he doesn't need to pay for it. A second implication grows out of verses 22 and 23. There, Jesus predicted his death. Now, that passage did not explain that his death would cover the disciples' sin obligation before God, but we know that that was the purpose of it. Here, Jesus takes on the obligation of Peter, providing for his temple tax, as well as the one Peter's quick mouth obligated Jesus to pay in verse 27. Instead of making Peter pay these obligations himself, Jesus provided payment for Peter's obligation to God if Peter believed and did what Jesus told him to do, as we saw in verse 27. And so this is a simple illustration of what Christ has done for all of us. We not only are obligated to serve and worship God, but we incur greater obligation to God every time we speak untruthful words or do any kind of sinful things. Yet Christ provides the means to cover all of our obligations to a holy and perfect God through his death for us on the cross. Here is one other truth to think about from this passage. Peter spoke for Jesus, on behalf of Jesus, with great confidence, but he was wrong. How confident are we that the things we say are true or false, based on our faith relationship with God? In other words, when people ask us if a loving God would really send people to hell, do we answer knowing God for who he is, or do we make up an answer like Peter did? What about if God would ever disapprove of two people who love each other, even if they're the same sex, or if one's already married, or if a guy and a girl want to live together without getting married? How often do we speak up for God, and do our words actually reflect what God's word says, rather than just a story that we made up? What about this? What if people ask if Christianity is the only way to God? Or could a sincere adherent to another religion who never heard the gospel be saved? Or any other in a long list of questions. Do we give scriptural answers to these questions? Or do we answer off the cuff on God's behalf, like Peter did? What about if someone asks whether all infants who die go to heaven or not? Or whether Jesus would vote for a certain presidential candidate or not? Do you speak your answer confidently like Peter did in verse 24, even if you're making it up? Or do you talk through the scriptural principles with the person who asked you? We are often too quick with our words, too confident about our answers. There are biblical principles that apply to any question in that previous list and many others. I'm not at all saying that we can't have a good answer to these questions, because of course we can. Instead, I'm asking you to consider your words. Do you speak for God like Peter did, recklessly, like Peter did in verse 24? Is there a better way to handle the questions that unbelievers bring? Here's something to ponder today, and I'll see you next time. May God bless you. Hope you have a great day today.